Listen up, buddy. I need you to hit like and subscribe so I can continue to report on interesting cases of logical malfeasance. Thanks, I really appreciate it. Most nights the city sleeps, but not me. When I am faced with a stack of statements on my desk, I cannot sleep, so I just sit in my office with a cup of coffee that has gone cold and continue my investigations. For I know that somewhere in that pile of statements there are arguments, real ones, the kind that try to prove something. And somewhere else in that pile are things that only look like arguments. That is the trouble with this business. You think you are chasing reasoning, and sometimes you end up chasing nothing at all, and you end up looking as foolish as the muttonhead who has never bet on a nag, but thinks he has a winning system. Anyway, I am here to tell you that I am the man for the job. You know why? Unlike the poor sap newbie at the racetrack, I know the difference between a modus ponens and a modus tollens. I am a logician. Now, I really don't want to have to remind you of this, but since I know you are currently studying for your logic detective's license, I am going to be nice at least this once. As we have seen before, an argument is a set of two or more statements with an inference claim. That's what we are all about here. One statement, which we are calling the conclusion, is supposed to follow from the others, which we are calling the premises. Take away the inference claim, and the whole thing collapses. If there is no inference claim, there is no argument. Got it now? Good, because I am getting tired of telling you this. But since you are such a bright student, I know you want to ask me a very important question. How can we tell when there is an inference claim present? Let me commend you. That is a very good question to ask. Much of the time, it is easy to see that an inference claim is being made, as easy as telling when Benny the Beak is using his loaded dice. But sometimes, the case gets murky. Consider the following little number. Birds are stupid. I really despise that woodpecker that keeps me awake at night. Does it not understand that our aluminum siding is not made of wood? Now that passage is clearly irritated, but is it an argument? Maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. It is very hard to tell. Maybe the author is trying to argue that birds are stupid, using the woodpecker as evidence. Or maybe the author is just tired and angry, and just expressing their feelings. So, as a good logic detective, what are you supposed to do with a case like this? Well, listen closely, my friend, for I'm going to tell you. In cases like that, a good logician applies what philosophers call the principle of charity. What is the principle of charity? It tells you that you should interpret the passage in the most reasonable way possible. In this case, you give the suspect the benefit of the doubt and try to turn it into an argument if you can. Still, this is not an ideal situation. Logicians like clarity. But in many cases, citizens are not clear about their intentions, and so you must infer them. If only there were something that a thoughtful citizen could do to ameliorate the situation, right? Well, there are things such a perspicacious citizen can do to help the helpless reader. Sometimes the author does us a favor. Sometimes the clues are right there on the page. These are the telltale words that the Logic Detective's Handbook calls indicator words. What is an indicator word? Well, it is a word that indicates something, dummy. And here's the thing. Good writers use indicator words when they are making arguments. Words that announce an inference claim. Words that tell you an argument is in progress. Of course, the citizen talking about the woodpecker did not do this. Maybe because their brains had been rattled by the bird's constant pecking. So let me give you an example of a case where a thoughtful and kind citizen did in fact use indicator words. Violence used in war is justified when we are attacked or about to be attacked. Since the present war is in response to an immediate threat of attack, it is therefore justified. Now, if you are like me, then two words jump off the page for you. These are since, and the word therefore. Those, my friend, are not ordinary words. They are indicator words. They are called indicator words because they indicate that the person is making an argument. They tell us that there is an inference claim present. They are thus very useful clues, so if you are wise, you will watch out for them. But they can sometimes indicate more than that an inference claim is being made. They can also tell us what role a statement is playing in the argument. This is because some indicator words are premise indicators, and some indicator words are conclusion indicators. Can you guess which kind of indicator the word therefore is? Does it look like a conclusion indicator or a premise indicator? Good job, my perspicacious friend. You are correct. Therefore is a conclusion indicator. Whatever follows it is the conclusion. And now, what about the word since? Is that a conclusion indicator, or does it indicate a premise? Again, I admire your perspicacity. Since is indeed a premise indicator. Whatever follows it is intended to support the conclusion. Now, I want you to think about premise and conclusion indicators as being like fingerprints at the scene. They tell you that the person is making an inference claim, so you do have an argument. And they also tell you exactly where to look to find the conclusion and the premises. If you have grasped this, then I must say that you are truly a genius with a brain to rival the great Sherlock Holmes himself. Let me tell you about some of the usual indicator words that a good logic detective learns to recognize. First, here are a few conclusion indicators. Thus, therefore. It follows that. We can conclude that. It must be the case that. Whenever you see those words, pay attention, my friend, because they are usually introducing the conclusion. Next, here are some premise indicators. Because, since, for the reason that, from. Those usually introduce premises, that is, statements that are supposed to support the conclusion. Now, it's at this point, I am sure that your keen, incisive mind has realized that not all citizens are nice citizens because not all citizens use conclusion and premise indicators when making arguments. Remember, always be a nice citizen. However, when others make arguments without using premise or conclusion indicators, they still sometimes leave behind clues about their intentions. Among the most important clues you need to be looking for are structural clues. What is a structural clue? Slow down there, Speedy. I'm about to tell you. As you have already grokked, arguments have a certain architecture. Premises often appear at the beginning of a passage, although they do not have to, and conclusions often appear at the end, although, again, they do not have to. Good arguers know that their audience may expect this pattern and thus will start with the premises of their argument and finish with the conclusion. A really kind arguer might even stick the conclusion at both the beginning and the end of their argument. Do you remember how your writing instructors always told you to include both a thesis statement and a conclusion? What they were really telling you to do was make the conclusion of your argument visible from both ends of the street. Poor writers sometimes hide the conclusion in the middle of a paragraph, which is like hiding the getaway car in the middle of traffic. Confusing and unnecessary and unlikely to succeed. So remember this. When you are analyzing a passage to see if it contains an argument, always look for structural clues. Look for things that look like premises, especially at the beginning of the passage. And look for something that looks like a conclusion, especially in a thesis statement and in the actual conclusion of an essay or the like. And now, armed as you are with your newfound knowledge of premise indicators, conclusion indicators, and structural clues, let me give you two cases to consider. Here is the first. I want you to tell me whether it is an argument or not. Suppose a citizen said the following: "We are just killing human beings in war. Wars are unjust. Killing is, after all, murder." Now, if this is an argument, then it must have a conclusion. But where is it? Where is the conclusion? It is not obvious. The author surely has not helped you any. You could just guess, like Steady Freddy does when he bets on the fights, but that is not a reliable method. Are you confused? I would not blame you in the slightest if you were confused. Now look at this version. Wars are unjust, because in war, we are just killing human beings. And killing is, after all, murder, and murder is unjust. So we can only conclude that war is unjust. Now tell me that the structure in this version is not better, not clearer. After all, the author has given us two big clues. First, look at all of those indicator words. I see the word because, which is a premise indicator, and I see the words we can only conclude that, which indicate a conclusion. Whoever the author of this argument is, they are a fine, upstanding citizen. Note as well that the author has given us structural clues. The conclusion appears at the beginning and again at the end. The writer has practically circled it in red pencil, like the location of a robbery on a police map. The citizen who presented this argument is indeed a fine citizen whom I would not mind having as my neighbor. Let me now give you a very strange example. It is so strange that I think it will convince you that your logical powers have multiplied, even while watching this video. So, my friend, I ask you to consider this masterpiece. Because blah, 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 and blah, 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 we can conclude that yada, yada, yada. Do you see it? Do you see the indicator words? The rest of the passage is utter nonsense. Like the kind of babbling I heard from Steady Freddy when he lost the tickets for his 4-horse accumulator. That is the funny thing, however. You do not need to know what any of those phrases mean to know that this is an argument, and even to identify the conclusion and the premises, because the indicator words plus the structure give everything away. They reveal the crime in all of its glory. The conclusion is yada, yada, yada. The premises are the two long strings of blah, blah, blah and blah, blah, blah. You do see it, do you not? Good. I just knew that you were a classy person. I am glad that you have learned that both indicator words and structure give you clues. Not just that a given passage is an argument, but also which statement is the conclusion and which statements are the premises. So let me finish with the moral of the story, because every investigation has a moral, does it not? The moral of the story is that good writers make their arguments easy to follow. They leave clues. They use indicator words. They use structural patterns. They give us clear signals that tell the reader what is going on. So if you are writing arguments yourself, and I hope you are, you should do the same. Do not hide the conclusion. Do not make the reader guess. Reasoning is not a magic trick. I would like to tell you that that is the end of my lecture for today, but I cannot, because one of my associates has pointed out something that we have not talked about, but that must be said. Remember, when you are trying to figure out if a given set of statements is an argument, you are really looking to see if the author has made an inference claim, and to determine that, you can often rely on indicator words and structural clues. Look for those, and you will be able to solve many cases. But my associate has pointed out to me that I did not discuss one other method, one that may be even more reliable than what you have learned here. After all, if you are in doubt, you could ask the author of the passage whether they intended to make an argument. So write this down in your notes. A good logic detective looks for 4 things: premise indicators, conclusion indicators, structural clues, and, when possible, ask the author what they intended. And now I am truly done with this lecture. You now need to practice what I have preached, so go look for arguments in the wild. You can find them everywhere, on television and political speeches, and even in late-night conversations at the Goose Bar. Now, please, excuse me. I have a date with my girlfriend.